Universal Monsters, Creature from the Black Lagoon Lives #1, is a sequel to the classic 1954 horror sci-fi film about an underwater monster. So get ready, folks. Things could be damp. Yeah, I recently talked about how I just saw the original Creature from the Black Lagoon movie for the very first time, and in truth I did it mostly in preparation for this issue because I was intrigued by it. So if nothing else, I can credit this issue for helping to expose me to a classic Universal monster movie. Our story here is about a journalist who hunts a serial killer into the heart of the Amazon, which naturally brings her into the creature's territory, and of course their paths intersect. One thing I'm a little bit confused about thus far is when this story takes place. The solicitation for the issue says it's years after the events of the original movie. But what does that mean? Are we talking a handful of years? Are we talking decades? What is it? I mean, there's no smartphones in this story, at least not thus far, so we can assume it's not post-2008, I guess. The art and colors on this book definitely deliver. We've got Matthew Roberts and Dave Stewart working on this book. And you know, the cover game for the issue is also pretty strong. Roberts and Stewart put forth a great one here, but I personally am partial to the one by Joshua Middleton. It reminds me of the underwater scenes from the original movie. From a writing standpoint, I wasn't blown away here, but this is a perfectly serviceable first chapter. And in the end, if we get something that's even half as good as the Dracula story that Image and Skybound put out not long ago, we'll have a good book on our hands here. You know, the more I'm exposed to it, the more I really love that old school creature costume from the original movie. Gillman is what they sometimes call the character. But you know what I didn't know until about an hour before I started recording here? The Gillman suit was apparently used on a 1965 episode of The Munsters. Yeah, the character was Uncle Gilbert, and he talked. He walks into the room and says, "Oh, it's great to be here with my family." What? Now that episode premiered in 1965, which was about 10 years after Creature came out and its subsequent sequels. And I know that back then media didn't necessarily have the sticking power that it does today. You know, there was no internet, there was no home media, etc., but it still feels weird to me. Like in a more modern context, that feels like it would be the equivalent of Jigsaw showing up on one of the later episodes of 2.5 Men. Although, to be honest, seeing John Cryer interact with Jigsaw might be worth it. So you know what, I'm kind of upset now that we didn't get that. Creature from the Black Lagoon Lives #2 is an issue that's drawn by Matthew Roberts, penciled by Dave Stewart, and written by Dan Waters and Ram... Oh, God. Alright, is it Ram V or Ram 5? Is it a Roman numeral? Or is it Ram the 5th? Or is it Ram? Is it Ram or Ram? This is a me problem, okay? I'm acknowledging that. It's not a him problem. The story really starts to bloom with this issue. And that happens sometimes. It's not always the most effective approach, but some writers sort of use the first issue to lay the groundwork, and then in the second issue things really ramp up. And it seems like that's what's happening here. One of the questions I had coming out of the first issue was when this story takes place as it relates to the original movie. Well, we have a character from the original movie who appears in this issue, so that helps in that regard. I hate when this happens, but there's some really beautiful art in this issue that I can't show you, but I'm going to try and convey to you how much I love it. It's an underwater shot of a boat going by, which in itself is kind of reminiscent of all the underwater shots we got in the movie. But in the very next panel down, you can just barely make out the Gillman, the monster, and you can see that he's watching, but just barely. That's a really great horror effect. It's beautiful art, beautiful coloring, beautiful work. Why would you go swimming in the Black Lagoon? You know, that place you're pretty sure a monster lives? Seems like it might be kind of a stupid decision to me. But our lead character does just that in Universal Monsters, Creature from the Black Lagoon Lives at number 3. But yeah, we open up the issue and there she is, just swimming in it. That water does not look very clean, by the way. Did I mention this character has almost drowned twice in this story alone? Monsters notwithstanding, you'd think that swimming wouldn't be her recreational activity of choice right now. Yeah, in this opening scene, our artistic team gives us some pretty awesome shots of the monster underwater. And those kinds of shots have consistently been great throughout this story, probably among its highlights. But I don't know, is it worth it to make our main character look dumb? This is the penultimate issue of this Creature from the Black Lagoon Lives book. It ends in issue 4. And you know, normally when I'm into a story, 4 issues isn't enough for me, but in this case I'm a fan of the less is more approach. So naturally something happens at the end of this issue to set up for the big climax next issue. And you know what, you can argue that it's a little hokey, but it worked for me. Universal Monsters, Creature from the Black Lagoon Lives number 4, ends the story on kind of a hokey note. Our main character does something violent and then she sort of reflects, have I become the monster? But you know what, that doesn't take away from the fact that this book was a very much worthwhile artistic endeavor that people who enjoyed the Creature from the Black Lagoon movie should very much enjoy in turn. It's unlike the time Gillman appeared on the Munsters, in that sense. One thing we do get in this issue that I've wanted as far back as the first issue is a timestamp, an indication of how much time has passed between this story and the events of the first movie, so I appreciated that. But yeah, in every sense of the word, I've really enjoyed the work that Image and Skybound have done with the Universal Monsters license so far. They did, of course, the Dracula one initially, and then they did the Creature from the Black Lagoon one here. Apparently the next one is going to be Frankenstein, and it starts next month. I'm game for that one.